Welcome to the community meeting for the Calderon Avenue Bike Lane Improvements Project. My name is Mary Chris Huang. I'm an associate civil engineer with the Public Works Department. With me is Robert Gonzalez, principal civil engineer with the city as well. And we are here to provide information on the project. Sorry about that. We are here to provide information on the project as well as gather input from the community that we can incorporate onto the project as we move forward to the next step. And so before I go on, I just wanted to confirm with Robert if we are recording and if the audio is okay.
The audio is great, and yes, we are recording.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us again. So a few things for tonight's meeting that I wanted to point out. All participants are currently muted. This presentation is being recorded, and the recording of this presentation as well as the slides will be made available on the city website. I'll be providing a link to that towards the end of the presentation. And we will also be having a question and answer time at the end of the presentation. A few ways to submit your questions tonight. You can choose to click on the raise hand icon, which you could probably see on the bottom of your viewing screen. Or if you are joining by phone, you can press *9. And the other option is to enter a question in the chat box. And with this, you can type in your questions and submit them at any time during the meeting. So here are the topics that I'll be going over in tonight's presentation, starting with the project background. So the Calderon Avenue Bike Lane Improvements Project was identified as a project under the Council Major Goals Work Plan. In 2017, we installed bike lanes along Calderon Avenue between Mercy Street to West Evelyn Avenue. And as shown on these pictures, we installed green bike lanes. In June 2020, Council approved the funding to implement bike lanes between Mercy Street to El Camino Real, and in turn, finishing the last leg of Calderon. So Class 2 bike lanes are proposed to be installed, and they are defined as designated signed, stripe, or stenciled one-way travel bike lanes on both sides of the roadway. Moving on to what we want to achieve and what's the project objective. So within Santa Clara County, Mountain View has the second highest population of commute bicyclists. And so implementing these bike lanes can enhance access for users of all ages and abilities. Particularly speaking of Class 2 bike lanes, the designated lane for bike travel provides a safe and more comfortable facility for biking with the separation between adjacent vehicle traffic and bicyclists. Focusing on why this project area. So shown here is the current bike map for the city. We see here that Calderon Avenue is already feeding off to existing facilities. If you can see my cursor, this is an existing facility on Phyllis Avenue, Dana Street, and West Evelyn Avenue. So by implementing the proposed improvements, this project creates a more complete bicycle network by filling in the gap, the important gap right here. And so, sorry, I missed a slide. And the bike lanes will also improve bicycle connectivity to the transit center, as well as nearby schools, which you can see are highlighted in purple here. And so now I'd like to move on to a poll for tonight for the attendees of this meeting and ask, how often do you park your vehicle along Calderon Avenue? In other words, does your property have space for you to park on your driveway, or do you live in a multi-residential area where you have designated parking stalls or parking space? Please answer as best as you can. And I will go ahead and try to activate the poll. Sorry. All right, great. All right, thank you. I'll give 5 more seconds or a couple more seconds. All right, so we'll end the poll right here. So here are the results. All right, thank you for submitting your responses. Moving on to another poll that we have. Which block along the project area do you live? If you feel comfortable to answer, please select either A, B, or C per the map provided, or if you're joining from another neighborhood or community, you may select the none of the above option. And so if we can get the second poll, perfect, thank you. All right, I'll just give a couple more seconds to see if we get any more responses. Okay. I think we got a good amount of voting.
So this is good representation. Sorry, I'm going to step in. This is Robert. We have 6 folks voting and at least 3 sections, or two of the 3 sections represented on the map. So this is great. And some of the folks I think maybe live off of Calderon.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So here are the results. All right. All right, so thank you all for your participation on those 2 polls. Now moving on throughout this presentation, I'll be discussing the existing on-street parking along the project area. So on this diagram shown, the estimated number of parking spaces currently available along Calderon between El Camino Real and Mercy Street are shown. These counts are based on 20-foot car lengths. The following slides will show block by block where parking is currently allowed. Before I move on, I just want to go over quickly the format of the next upcoming slides. On the bottom left, you see the entire project area. The top image will be a zoom in of the block that we'll be focusing on for the slide. On this top image, we see a blue star, which you could use as a "you are here" kind of locator. And this will represent where the street image shown on the bottom right is kind of focusing on. I'd also like to mention that as I present the next couple slides, I'll be referring to the top travel lane you see here, if my cursor is shown, as the west side of the street, and this as the east side of the street. So without further ado, looking at this block between El Camino Real and Center Street, we can already see that there are some areas where no parking is enforced, and there's an existing signage to enforce where parking is prohibited. Right. And so for this block, we have an estimated count of 4 available parking spaces on the west side of the street. Here I've highlighted it in blue, where vehicles are able to park. So please note that existing driveways and red curb areas were not taken into account of available on-street parking spaces. Now looking at the block between Center would be around here, and Church Street. Again, the bottom right image is a street view of where the blue star on the top is located. So here we have an estimated count of 9 parking spaces on the west side of the street and 13 on the east side of the street. Moving slightly north, there are about 2 parking spaces that fronts the existing commercial space on the corner of Church and Calderon. All right, making our way to the following block. So between Church and Jesse on the west side, we had a count of 5 available parking spaces, as well as 5 on the west side between Jesse and Paul Avenue. Then on the east side between Dalma and Paul, we had around 8 parking spaces, available parking spaces. Then moving north of Paul, we can find about 6 parking spaces on on both sides of the street. I believe here we show just another view from this block. So last but not least, we have Vincent Drive or Eldora Drive towards Mercy Street. And just wanted to note that here highlighted in green is an existing city park. And so here we have an estimated number of 3 parking spaces on the west and 4 parking spaces on the east. So just wanted to note that kind of in this bulb out area, the street is not wide enough to accommodate vehicle parking. And so that's why our counts start where the street gets wider around here, closer towards Mercy Street. So here again are the counts of estimated on-street parking spaces, now taking into account both sides of the street for a total on each block. As part of staff's research, field visits were conducted to get a count of parked vehicles at various times and on various days. By doing these counts, we wanted to get an idea of how much on-street parking along the project area is utilized. So shown here, the blue text represents the number of available on-street parking spaces. And now the green numbers that you see that were added take into account the parking surveys that the city staff conducted. So the counts in green were taken between around the noon or afternoon times during weekdays, in particular, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays of more recent months. So the parking survey shows a total supply, so the numbers in blue added together, totals a total of 64 parking spaces in this segment. And of that, 33 were observed parked on street during the weekday afternoon period. So the sum of the green counts. So here now we show in orange the counts that were conducted during parking surveys during the weekends of evenings, in particular Friday and Sunday in the later evening. A total of 20 parked vehicles were observed. So these counts may fluctuate on a day-to-day basis and may not reflect a typical case out there. But as mentioned, the parking surveys were conducted on different days and times so that staff can get an overall picture of the utilization of on-street parking within the project area. And so the following image shows a side view or cross-section of the current conditions along Calderon Avenue. Specifically speaking of the segment between Center Street and Mercy Street, there is essentially parking along both sides of the street and one lane for vehicle travel in each direction. There is no striping for bike lanes, so bicyclists are required to share the road with vehicles. So for this project, we are proposing Class 2 bike lanes from El Camino Real to Mercy Street. The cross sections I'll be going over represent what is proposed. And so between Jesse Lane and Vincent Drive, the curb to curb measurement is approximately 36 feet. With this width, we can accommodate one bike lane and one lane for travel in each direction. Where there's a little bit more room, a striped buffer can be added to each direction of the bike lane. So this buffer is added separation between vehicles and bicyclists. And this configuration is proposed between Center Street and Dalma Drive. Where the street is even wider, we are able to accommodate on-street parking along with the proposed bike lanes and vehicle travel. So the section within the project area wide enough to accommodate or for parking to remain is located between Vincent Drive and Mercy Street. Although not shown here, we are proposing bike lanes between Center Street and El Camino Real. This segment will be restriped, but will still include the same number of vehicle travel lanes currently existing. As mentioned earlier in this presentation, adding bike lanes in each direction of travel along Calderon Avenue provides a number of benefits. Benefits including connectivity to existing facilities and bike routes, and enhancing access for users of all ages and abilities. However, what can be concluded from these cross sections is that there will be a trade-off of losing street parking along Calderon Avenue. And so the illustration on this slide shows where on-street parking is proposed to be no longer available with the implementation of this project. So shaded in blue, the segment between Center Street and Vincent Drive will have lanes designated for bike travel as well as lanes for vehicle travel. And so that actually brings me to the question and answer time. So if you would like to submit questions, here again are the three options you have. If you'd like to raise your hand, you'll be able to verbally ask your question, or the facilitator will just be prompting you to speak. If you're joining on phone, you can press *9, or if you want to type in your question, you could submit them in the chat box. So I could see that we had a question during the meeting, Robert, or during the presentation.
Yes, we did. So I did my best to answer it, but we can add to that. So the question was any survey done during the weekends, daytime weekends? So my answer was that we did not choose to do one during the daytime on the weekends. Typically, we expect the weekend evenings to represent a high demand period for parking. A lot of folks after 9 p.m., 10 p.m. on a weekend will be back home, and you can see that there's a high demand for parking in those times. So we did not choose to do a survey, say, midday on a weekend.
Right. Thank you, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for submitting your question.
Yeah, thank you. Suzanne Martinez.
All right, we got another comment. Many people have guests on weekends. Okay. Yes, that is a good comment to make. We'll definitely take that feedback. Right.
So John Cordy's,
go ahead,
there
Rob.
does seem to be any data about availability of parking on adjacent streets. Assuming it is no worse than on Calderon, there seems to be plenty of nearby parking. William Wu asked, approximately when will the project start and finish? And Suzanne Martinez, did you consider any other alternatives to eliminate parking on both sides of the street? So let's take Suzanne's question first, and then we can jump over to Williams.
Okay, sounds good. So for Suzanne's question, were any alternatives considered to eliminate parking on both sides of the street? So with the feedback from tonight, we do plan to, gauging off of what we hear from the community and the attendees of this meeting, we do plan to reevaluate possible some of the preliminary design, the cross sections that was presented earlier. And with that, we can evaluate any opportunities for parking to remain. I think one constraint, though, to mention is the width of the street. So we are limited to what is existing out there.
Right. If we go back to the slide that shows the profiles, I think we can see that certain sections of the street are just, we're limited with the width of the street. And to the extent we could, we looked for opportunities to keep parking where it is and to also place bike facilities.
Right.
So another question came in. How many bicyclists are expected to use the route daily? Seems drastic to remove all the parking on both sides of the street. So we do know that this is a connector location for several destinations in the city, whether that's the transit center or several school sites. And we already know that this is a known route. So bicyclists throughout the city already use Calderon. I can reach out to see if I can get an estimate on how many bicyclists we think will be using it on a daily basis. I can find out.
Thank you, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
All right. As questions are rolling in, I think the next question we'll take is, do you have any analysis on estimates of increased usage by cyclists once the infrastructure is in place, or safety metrics you hope to achieve once the bike lanes are in place? So again, I think we can look into that. I think the transportation planning.
Yeah, what we do know, I don't know if we're going to get specific analysis here, but what we do know is that we typically see the more bike infrastructure you put in, the more comfortable folks feel using those network streets. So if you can communicate to the bike community effectively, you will see an uptick in usage from casual riders who feel safer when there's a bike lane, and from regular riders who gravitate towards those because they know they're going to be safer and it's a known route to get from point A to point B.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I did miss one of the earlier questions. Approximately when will the project start and finish? So we'll get to the rest of the questions, but I do just want to show this next slide that I was going to share with the approximate project schedule. So this is what's being anticipated of the events to come, the next steps to come for this project. But starting off, we have tonight's community meeting where we are. Then with the feedback, with the great questions that are coming in and feedback from the attendees, we will be refining our design. And then once we have refined design, we can proceed to bring the project to City Council for consideration. Residents will be able to provide feedback again if you choose to attend the council meeting, but certainly your feedback here tonight will be included for council's consideration and review of the project. And then with council approval, we anticipate starting construction of the bike lanes around later in the fall of this year. And I would anticipate that being wrapped up in either winter or spring next year. All right.
So another question.
Oh, yes.
Do Class 2 bikeways always require dedicated lanes, or can they have door-wide openings rather than full lines? I'm taking this as to mean a dashed line rather than a solid white line. So I can take this back to our transportation folks, but my understanding of a Class 2 bikeway is that it's two solid white lines with or without a buffer. And it would be, the only time you would use a dash line is if you have an area where you expect traffic to cross, like a intersection or a driveway.
Mm-hmm.
I could reach out to one of our traffic people to get an answer to that.
Right. Yes, I think I got confirmation that Class 2 is a white solid line.
Great. All right.
All right.
From Vincent to Mercy, there is room for buffered bike lanes if the 16-foot reserved for parking is removed. Even removing parking on one side creates 8 feet to add a 2-foot buffer on each side. That's a good comment. Thank you, John Cordis. Nancy Cito. Have you looked at reducing the speed limit from 30 to 25 miles per hour? So that would be a different analysis. We didn't look at that specifically when we were designing the striping. We can go back to our traffic engineer to see if that's been evaluated previously. They might have actually scoped that very early in the project. If you probably, most of the folks on this call probably know this, but this is the second phase of striping on Calderon. There's a few blocks on the east side of Calderon towards Evelyn that are already striped, and that question may have been resolved earlier on in the process.
Right.
When you look again at the route, there are places where the street is actually not entirely straight. Can you look carefully at the actual terrain to see if there are any spots where parking might work? Yeah, we can do that. She's correct. The street is not entirely straight for the whole project work area.
Yes,
So we can look at that. there's no systematic or proven way to estimate new bicycle lane usage. The more infrastructure and the better connected it is, the more it will be used. It also takes time for people to learn about and adapt to new infrastructure.
Thank you for that comment.
And Suzanne Martinez, finally, has anyone looked at the speed limit of 30 miles on Calderon? It has lots of speeding. Police often set up spots on Calderon and Church. If children are going to be using, dropping to 25 might make it safer. So we can definitely look at that. What we do know also is that once we put in a bike facility and narrow the physical limits of a lane, just having the white stripe and a physically narrower lane does tend to slow traffic down. So we'll talk to our traffic engineer about that. Thank you. Oh, I am going to promote Carla Ochoa, who is one of our traffic planners. Carla, can you hear me?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to answer real quick the speed limits question. We can't arbitrarily set a speed limit. We have to do speed surveys. So I don't have the speed survey for Calderon in front of me, but realistically, I don't think it was part of this project. It's a standard operational, I guess, surveys that we do on a regular, and so we would have to do speed surveys, and we use that data to establish the speed limits.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you, Carla.
All right. Robert, I think Ria also would like to weigh in on one of the questions that was asked.
I will.
Yeah, I wanted to weigh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to weigh in on the question about the dash line. So the dash line bike facility is an advisory bike lane, and this is considered an experimental treatment. It's not usually used for roadways that have a center line. And the city tends to be cautious about using experimental treatments.
Great. Thank you, Ria. And by the way, Ria is from our transportation planning section, and Carla Ochoa is from our traffic section. So I'm sorry I didn't introduce before they spoke, but really appreciate you both helping us respond to the attendees' questions. All right, so another comment or question: please don't implement design that force people riding a bicycle to ride in the door zone of cars. That is what allowing parking on the Vincent to Mercy segment will allow. Do not allow parking in this section. Okay, that's something, some good feedback that we could consider.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Next comment. With Graham Middle School and MVHS back in session, many kids are riding on Calderon to school again. Can MVPD spend more time on Calderon during commute hours to help reduce speed and perhaps gather more information about speeding on Calderon, given many children use Calderon twice a day? So yeah, absolutely. Just so folks know that I'll be taking all of the chat, all the comments in your chat, and pulling all of those comments together. So these are not lost once you folks are off the meeting. And Ria Hutabartas, our transportation manager, says I can talk to PD about that. So yes, real-time response. Thank you, Ria.
Thank you.
So we're mostly looking at the chat. I don't see a lot of hands raised by the attendees. So you're certainly welcome to speak to us as well as write in the chat. Either one is welcome.
Alright.
So
Right.
Ria asked, when will school be back in session? So we can find out that specifically. I believe they just announced that they're going back hybrid this week or next week. Suzanne Martinez wrote, would you also consider directional arrows to help get bike riders to stay on one side or the other? Often they ride now on both sides of Calderon in both directions, creating hazards for people pulling out of driveways.
Okay. Yes, we do intend to have pavement markings showing the direction of travel for the bike lanes, as well as signage to show if they are going the wrong way. But certainly, this is good feedback to know that that there may be some who are not maybe following the guidelines. But yes, really good to know that. Appreciate your comment.
I've got a hand raised. I'm going to allow John Cordes to speak. John, you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is John Cordes. I'm a resident of Sunnyvale, and I bike through Mountain View regularly. And I've been on this section quite a bit. I wanted to say that, given how heavily used this is by children going to the school, I'd like the city to consider doing some traffic calming efforts to slow down the traffic here, either, more bulb outs or more crossings or speed humps that would slow down the traffic. I mean, you've already heard from people that it's an enforcement problem and it's a known safety problem. So please take that back. I realize it's not part of this project, but it should be something the city considers. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, John.
John also wrote, please include wayfinding to the schools, I suppose, plural. That won't be part of this project, but we can certainly work with our engineers to evaluate where we would put those wayfinding signs. That would be a separate project, and it's currently, we'd be looking for funding for that first.
All right. I think we'll give maybe another minute or two if for any questions in the chat box, unless if we see a lot more coming in, then we'll extend that time. But I'll give another minute or two in case. Looks like we are slowing down to or heading towards the end of this presentation. So when will the PowerPoint be available on the website? Yes, so well, we will be uploading the PowerPoint as well as the recording of this presentation. And so that will be available by early next week, around maybe Monday or Tuesday. In this, I will be providing my email address. So if you do have, want the website link or want a little update as to where they might be, feel free to contact me. I'll actually go ahead and display it right here. So feel free to email me if for any case it's not available at the time you check, but we do intend to have it available by early next week. If I am on the notification list for the project, will I be notified when the recording gets posted? I could certainly do that. Yes, I can certainly reach out to the email addresses for the attendees of this meeting and let you know that these materials are available to review again. All right. So Robert, do you see any other raised hands on your end?
No more raised hands. I don't see any more comments coming in. The two follow-ups that I identified was discussing with police department regarding the known speeding issue and looking into other alternatives to implement traffic speeding elements into this project. And then also taking another look at opportunities to save any parking that we can based on the geometry of the street.
Great. Yes, that's great take of what we heard from the attendees from this chat box. So appreciate all of your feedback and your questions. We will definitely, as mentioned in our schedule, be refining the design, evaluating any alternatives. But yes, thank you all for your time. I think with that said, I don't see, oh, thank you, John. Thank you, John, for your comment. So yes, I think we are going to just wrap up tonight's community meeting. Thank you all again for your time, and looking forward to moving this project along. And feel free to reach out to me if ever you have questions on updates of the project. And yes, looking forward to seeing where this project goes. So thank you all for attending tonight's meeting, and have a great rest of your day.